Ladies and gentlemen, my true discouragement is not merely an emotion, it is a moment of confrontation between who we are and who we are becoming. Every human soul at some point walks through a valley where meaning seems distant and hope feels fragile. Yet it is precisely in these moments that the psyche begins its deepest work. We often believe discouragement means failure, but psychologically, discouragement is a signal. It tells us that an old version of ourselves can no longer carry the weight of our future. Something within us is asking to grow. The human mind seeks comfort, certainty, and approval, but growth demands uncertainty. When life removes our illusions, we feel lost, not because we are broken, but because we are transforming. Just as night precedes dawn, confusion precedes clarity. Within each of us lies a hidden strength, a part of the self that awakens only when challenged. When everything goes well, we live on the surface. But when hardship arrives, we descend inward, and there, in the depths, we discover resilience we never knew existed. Discouragement whispers, "You are not enough." But the deeper self answers, "You are not finished." Every obstacle forces us to confront fear, doubt, and insecurity, the shadows we try to avoid. Yet these shadows are not enemies, they are teachers. When we face them, we reclaim energy that was trapped in fear and transform it into purpose. Remember this: a meaningful life is not one without struggle, but one in which struggle becomes meaningful. The strongest individuals are not those who never fall, but those who understand that falling is part of becoming whole. When you feel discouraged, do not ask, "Why is this happening to me?" Ask instead, "What is this trying to awaken within me?" Because the soul does not grow in comfort, it grows through confrontation with reality. Every setback is an invitation to deeper awareness. Every disappointment strips away illusion, and every moment of darkness prepares the psyche for a greater light. So never be discouraged. What feels like an ending may simply be the breaking of an old shell. Beneath frustration, beneath doubt, beneath temporary defeat, your true self is forming. Trust the process of becoming via Vide, for the person you are meant to be is not created in moments of ease, but forged in moments when giving up seems easier, and yet you choose to continue. And in choosing to continue, you discover the greatest truth: you were never losing your way, you were finding yourself. Discouragement is often misunderstood as a sign that something has gone wrong, that progress has stopped, or that we are somehow inadequate. Yet, from a deeper psychological perspective, discouragement frequently appears at the very moment when inner growth is trying to take place. It emerges when the old version of ourselves, built on familiar habits, beliefs, and comforts, can no longer support the demands of who we are becoming. What feels like emotional heaviness is often the tension between the known self and the emerging self. When we grow inwardly, the psyche must reorganize itself. Old expectations collapse, previous certainties lose their meaning, and goals that once seemed clear begin to feel uncertain. This transition naturally creates discomfort. The mind interprets this instability as failure, but in reality, it is evidence of transformation. Just as muscles ache when they strengthen, the soul experiences discouragement when it stretches beyond its previous limits. Discouragement also forces us to confront illusions we once relied upon. We may discover that success does not come as quickly as we imagined, that approval from others cannot sustain us, or that external achievements alone cannot provide lasting fulfillment. These realizations can feel painful, yet they are necessary steps towards psychological maturity. Growth requires the shedding of false identities, and this shedding rarely feels pleasant. In moments of discouragement, the ego feels threatened because it loses control. The path forward becomes unclear, and uncertainty replaces confidence. However, this uncertainty opens the door to deeper awareness. It invites reflection, self-examination, and the discovery of inner resources that remain hidden during times of comfort. Instead of moving mechanically through life, we begin to question, to search and to understand ourselves more honestly. What we call discouragement is often the psyche slowing us down so that we can realign with our authentic direction. It asks us to pause, to listen inwardly, and to reconsider what truly matters. Through this process, resilience is formed, not the superficial confidence that depends on success, but a quiet strength rooted in self-understanding. Therefore, discouragement should not be seen as proof of failure, but as evidence that change is occurring beneath the surface. It signals that growth is underway, even when results are not yet visible. The seed underground experiences darkness before it ever reaches the light, and in the same way, human development often feels uncertain before clarity appears. If we learn to remain patient during these moments, discouragement transforms into guidance. It becomes a teacher rather than an obstacle, reminding us that evolution of the self is rarely comfortable but always meaningful. And when we endure it with awareness, we realize that discouragement was never meant to stop us. It was meant to deepen us. Struggles possess a unique psychological power because they force us to encounter parts of ourselves that remain dormant during comfort and stability. When life moves smoothly, we tend to rely only on familiar abilities and surface-level confidence. Much of our inner potential stays unused, quietly waiting beneath awareness. It is only when difficulty interrupts our sense of control that deeper psychological resources begin to awaken. Challenges disrupt routine patterns of thinking. They confront us with uncertainty, fear, and limitation, and in doing so they demand adaptation. At first, this confrontation feels overwhelming because the conscious mind searches for immediate solutions based on past experience. When those solutions fail, something important happens. The psyche begins to reach beyond habitual responses. Creativity increases, intuition sharpens, and resilience starts to form. What seemed like weakness becomes the doorway through which hidden strength emerges. Struggle also compels self-confrontation. In moments of hardship, we can no longer hide from insecurity, doubt, or fear. These aspects of ourselves, often pushed into the unconscious, rise to the surface. While uncomfortable, this encounter allows integration. By facing vulnerability rather than avoiding it, we reclaim psychological energy that was previously trapped in denial or avoidance. The energy once used to escape fear becomes strength, used to overcome it. Furthermore, adversity strengthens the individual's relationship with meaning. When life is easy, motivation often depends on external rewards, praise, success, or recognition. But struggle shifts attention inward. We begin asking deeper questions. Why continue? What truly matters? These questions activate purpose, and purpose generates endurance far stronger than temporary motivation. Hidden psychological strength is not merely enduron. Say of pain, it is the discovery of meaning within difficulty. Struggles also teach emotional flexibility. Each obstacle requires adjustment, patience, and tolerance for uncertainty. Over time, the psyche learns that discomfort is survivable. Confidence then evolves from fragile optimism into grounded self-trust. The understanding that even when circumstances are unpredictable, one possesses the inner capacity to respond and adapt. In this way, struggle acts like pressure shaping raw material into something stronger. Without resistance, strength remains theoretical. Only through challenge does it become real and embodied. The person who has faced hardship carries a quiet stability, not because life became easier, but because they discovered capabilities they never knew existed. Thus, struggles do not create strength from nothing. They reveal what was already present but hidden. They awaken courage, deepen awareness, and expand the boundaries of the self. What initially appears as an obstacle becomes a catalyst, activating psychological power that comfort alone could never uncover. Transformation rarely begins in moments of ease, because comfort encourages repetition rather than change. When life feels safe and predictable, the mind settles into familiar patterns, and the personality operates within well-established boundaries. While comfort provides stability, it can also quietly limit growth. The psyche prefers what is known, even when the known no longer supports development. As long as we remain comfortable, there is little psychological reason to question ourselves or expand beyond our current identity. The end of comfort, however, disrupts this stability. Unexpected challenges, uncertainty, loss, or dissatisfaction create inner tension. At first, this tension feels unsettling because it removes the illusion of control, yet this disturbance is precisely what awakens transformation. When familiar structures collapse, we are forced to reconsider beliefs, habits, and roles that once defined us. The person we were can no longer function in the same way, and a new adaptation becomes necessary. Discomfort pushes awareness inward. Instead of moving automatically through life, we begin to reflect. We ask deeper questions about purpose, meaning, and authenticity. This questioning marks the beginning of psychological change. The ego, which once relied on certainty, learns to tolerate ambiguity. In this space of uncertainty, creativity and self-discovery emerge. New perspectives appear because the mind is no longer confined by old assumptions. Transformation also requires the courage to face vulnerability. When comfort disappears, fears surface: fear of failure, rejection, or inadequacy. These fears reveal parts of the self that were previously hidden beneath routine and distraction. By confronting them, we integrate neglected aspects of our personality. The process is not smooth or immediate. It often feels like confusion or instability. Yet beneath this chaos, the psyche reorganizes itself toward greater wholeness. Just as nature uses pressure and change to create new forms, human development depends on periods of discomfort. Growth demands movement beyond the familiar, and movement always carries risk. What once felt secure must be released so that something more authentic can take shape. The ending of comfort is therefore not punishment, but invitation. An invitation to evolve. Over time, we begin to understand that comfort itself is not the goal of life. Awareness is. When comfort ends, we gain the opportunity to discover strength, values, and capacities that remain invisible in ease. Transformation unfolds not because life becomes harder, but because difficulty compels us to become deeper, wiser, and more conscious. In this way, the loss of comfort marks the true beginning of becoming. It signals that life is urging us forward beyond limitation toward a more expanded version of ourselves, one formed not by safety, but by growth. Human beings often spend much of their lives avoiding inner fears, believing that ignoring them will preserve peace and stability. These fears may appear as insecurity, jealousy, anger, shame, or deeply buried memories that challenge the image we wish to maintain about ourselves. Yet what we avoid does not disappear. It retreats into the unconscious, where it continues to influence thoughts, emotions, and behavior without our awareness. The more we deny these inner experiences, the more fragmented our sense of self becomes. Facing inner fears begins the process of psychological integration because it allows us to acknowledge parts of ourselves that were previously rejected. Every individual carries both light and shadow, qualities that society encourages, as well as traits that are judged or suppressed. When we refuse to recognize these hidden aspects, we create an internal division. One part of the psyche struggles to maintain control while another remains unheard, expressing itself indirectly through anxiety, projection, or emotional conflict. Confronting fear does not mean eliminating it. Rather, it means understanding it. When we turn toward what frightens us instead of escaping it, we begin to see its origin. Fear often protects vulnerability, past wounds, or unmet needs. By observing it consciously, we transform fear from an enemy into a messenger. The energy once used to suppress these feelings becomes available for growth and creativity. Self-integration occurs when opposing parts of the personality are allowed to coexist. Strength and vulnerability, confidence and doubt, reason and emotion all become recognized as essential aspects of a co-metit human being. This acceptance reduces inner conflict because the psyche no longer wastes energy fighting itself. Instead, It moves toward balance and harmony. Facing inner fears also deepens authenticity. When we accept our imperfections, we no longer depend entirely on external validation. We become less defensive and more compassionate toward ourselves and others, recognizing that struggle is universal. This awareness strengthens emotional resilience because identity is no longer built on denial but on honest self-knowledge. The process can feel uncomfortable, even unsettling, because it challenges long-held defenses. Yet within this discomfort lies freedom. As hidden fears are brought into awareness, they lose their unconscious power. What once controlled us from the shadows becomes integrated into conscious understanding, allowing wiser choices and healthier relationships. Ultimately, self-integration is the experience of becoming whole, not perfect but unified. By facing inner fears, we reclaim lost parts of ourselves and restore psychological balance. The journey inward reveals that wholeness is not achieved by removing darkness, but by learning to include it within a larger awareness. Through courage and self-reflection, fear transforms into insight, and fragmentation gives way to inner unity. Hardship has a unique ability to strip away the surface layers of identity that we often mistake for our true selves. In ordinary circumstances, people tend to define themselves through roles, achievements, social approval, or external stability. These elements create a sense of certainty, yet they often reflect adaptation to the outer world rather than genuine self-understanding. When hardship arrives, whether through loss, failure, uncertainty, or emotional struggle, these outer structures begin to weaken, and the individual is confronted with something deeper. Difficult experiences remove distractions and force inward reflection. Situations that cannot be controlled or easily solved challenge the ego's belief that it is fully in charge. In this confrontation, familiar coping mechanisms may fail, leaving a person feeling vulnerable or exposed. Although painful, this exposure allows deeper psychological truths to surface. One begins to see personal fears, values, strengths, and limitations more clearly than ever before. Hardship reveals the deeper self because it demands authenticity. During struggle, superficial motivations lose their power. Approval from others, material success, or temporary comfort no longer provide sufficient meaning. Instead, individuals begin asking fundamental questions: what truly matters? What gives life purpose? What part of me remains steady even when circumstances collapse? These questions lead beyond the constructed identity toward the core of the personality. In moments of adversity, hidden qualities often emerge unexpectedly. Courage appears where fear once dominated. Patience develops through prolonged uncertainty. Compassion grows from personal suffering, allowing deeper understanding of others' pain. These qualities were always present, but remained unnoticed until hardship activated them. The deeper self is not created by struggle. It is revealed through it. Hardship also reshapes perception. Experiences of difficulty expand emotional depth, making individuals more aware of life's complexity. Joy becomes more meaningful after sorrow, and resilience grows from surviving what once seemed unbearable. Through struggle, people learn that their identity is not limited to success or failure, but rooted in an inner capacity to endure and adapt. Furthermore, adversity encourages integration between strength and vulnerability. The deeper self recognizes that weakness does not negate worth. Instead, vulnerability becomes a source of connection and wisdom. By accepting both resilience and fragility, the individual moves towards psychological wholeness. Over time, many come to realize that hardship acted as a teacher rather than an obstacle. It dismantled illusions and guided attention inward, where lasting stability resides. The deeper self emerges not in moments of ease, but in moments when life demands honesty, courage, and reflection. Thus, hardship reveals who we are beneath expectation and appearance. It uncovers the enduring core of the psyche, the part capable of growth, meaning, and transformation, reminding us that within struggle lies the discovery of our most authentic self. Human beings naturally seek comfort and safety, often believing that happiness lies in avoiding pain, conflict, or difficulty. Yet psychological experience repeatedly shows that a life built solely on avoidance gradually loses depth and vitality. When we continually escape discomfort, we may protect ourselves from temporary suffering, but we also distance ourselves from the experiences that give life meaning. Meaning does not arise from ease alone. It emerges from engagement with challenges that demand effort, courage, and conscious participation. Struggle forces us to confront reality rather than remain within illusion. Avoidance allows problems to remain unresolved, lingering beneath awareness and quietly shaping our emotions and decisions. In contrast, facing struggle requires active involvement with life's complexity. It compels us to make choices, take responsibility, and discover what truly matters. Through this process, experiences gain significance because we invest ourselves fully in overcoming obstacles rather than retreating from them. When individuals endure hardship, they begin to recognize values that comfort alone cannot reveal. Patience develops through waiting, resilience through repeated effort, and wisdom through confronting failure. Each challenge becomes a dialogue between the individual and existence itself. The effort required to move forward transforms ordinary experiences into meaningful ones because meaning grows from participation, not passivity. Avoidance often promises relief, but creates emptiness. When difficulties are ignored, fear tends to expand, and life gradually becomes smaller as more situations are avoided. Opportunities for growth are lost, and the individual may feel disconnected or directionless. Struggle, however, expands the psyche. By facing challenges, we learn that discomfort can be endured and understood. This realization builds confidence rooted not in certainty, but in lived experience. Meaning also arises from the transformation that struggle produces. When we overcome something difficult, we recognize our own capacity for change. The story of effort becomes part of our identity, giving coherence to our experiences. Pain, when faced consciously, becomes integrated into personal understanding rather than remaining a source of confusion or resentment. Through struggle, suffering is not wasted, it is shaped into insight. Furthermore, struggle connects us to others. Shared difficulties create empathy and compassion, reminding us that human existence is collective rather than isolated. Meaning deepens when personal challenges allow us to understand and support others who face similar battles. In this way, struggle strengthens both individual identity and human connection. Ultimately, meaning is not discovered by escaping life's challenges, but by engaging with them fully. Avoidance postpones growth, while struggle invites transformation. By walking through difficulty rather than around it, we uncover purpose, resilience, and self-knowledge. Life becomes meaningful not because it is free from hardship, but because hardship calls forth the deepest parts of who we are and allows us to shape our existence with awareness and intention. Self-development begins at the edge of certainty, where familiar structures no longer provide clear answers and the future cannot be fully predicted. Human beings naturally seek stability because certainty creates a sense of psychological safety. We prefer clear paths, defined outcomes, and predictable environments, yet genuine growth rarely occurs within these secure boundaries. As long as everything is known and controlled, the personality continues repeating established patterns rather than evolving into something new. Confronting uncertainty challenges the mind's desire for control. It introduces questions without immediate solutions in situations that demand adaptation rather than routine responses. At first, uncertainty produces anxiety because the ego relies on fixed identities and expectations to maintain confidence. When these expectations dissolve, individuals may feel lost or doubtful. However, this state of not knowing is precisely where development becomes possible. Without uncertainty, there is no need to explore new perspectives or discover hidden capacities. Uncertainty forces deeper awareness. When clear direction disappears, we are compelled to reflect inwardly instead of relying solely on external guidance. We begin to examine our values, motivations, and beliefs more honestly. Decisions must come from inner understanding rather than imitation or habit. This process strengthens individuality because growth becomes self-directed rather than shaped only by societal expectations. Facing uncertainty also cultivates psychological flexibility. Life constantly changes, and rigid thinking struggles to adapt to new realities. By learning to tolerate ambiguity, the psyche becomes more resilient. Confidence gradually shifts from needing guaranteed outcomes to trusting one's ability to respond creatively to whatever arises. This form of confidence is deeper and more stable because it depends on inner capability rather than external predictability. Moreover, uncertainty opens the door to creativity and transformation. When old answers no longer work, imagination becomes active. New ideas, goals, and identities emerge because the mind is no longer confined by previous assumptions. Many of life's most meaningful discoveries occur during periods when individuals feel unsure of their direction but remain willing to continue exploring. Confronting uncertainty also reveals courage. Courage is not the absence of fear but the willingness to move forward despite incomplete knowledge. Each step taken without certainty strengthens self-trust, demonstrating that growth does not require perfect clarity. Over time, individuals learn that uncertainty is not an enemy but a natural condition of life itself. Through this process, self-development becomes an ongoing journey rather than a fixed destination. The individual learns to coexist with change, accepting that identity evolves continuously. Instead of seeking permanent security, one develops the capacity to navigate complexity with awareness and adaptability. In this way, uncertainty becomes the catalyst for transformation. By facing what is unknown rather than avoiding it, we expand our understanding of ourselves and the world. Self-development unfolds not in moments of guaranteed success, but in the courageous willingness to step into the unknown and allow growth to emerge through experience. Every setback disrupts the path we consciously planned, yet from a deeper psychological perspective, such disruptions often serve a necessary purpose in personal development. Human beings tend to move toward goals shaped by expectations, sectarian nay, ideal conditioning, or idealized images of success. However, these goals do not always align with the deeper needs of the psyche. When a setback occurs, failure, rejection, loss, or unexpected change, it interrupts automatic movement and forces reflection. What appears as an obstacle on the surface may actually be a correction guiding the individual toward a more authentic direction. Individuation, the process of becoming one's true and whole self, requires more than achievement. It requires self-awareness. Setbacks create moments where self-image is challenged. The roles and identities we rely upon may no longer function, revealing hidden dependencies or unconscious motivations. This confrontation can feel painful because it exposes vulnerabilities and limitations we prefer not to see. Yet without this exposure, growth remains superficial. A setback compels the individual to ask deeper questions. Why did this path matter so much? What expectations shaped my decisions? Which parts of myself have I neglected while pursuing external validation? These questions shift attention from external success to internal understanding. In this way, setbacks slow the ego's forward momentum and allow the deeper self to be heard. Often, setbacks reveal unconscious patterns. Repeated disappointments may uncover fears, unresolved conflicts, or beliefs that quietly influence behavior. By recognizing these patterns, individuals gain the opportunity to integrate previously ignored aspects of their personality. What once appeared as repeated failure becomes meaningful information about the self. Awareness transforms experience into wisdom. Setbacks also strengthen psychological balance. Success alone can inflate the ego, creating an illusion of complete control. Difficulty, however, introduces humility and realism. It reminds us that growth involves adaptation, patience, and learning There then constant victory, this balance between confidence and humility, is essential for individuation, because wholeness requires acceptance of both strength and limitation. Furthermore, setbacks encourage resilience and inner independence. When external outcomes do not match expectations, individuals gradually learn to ground their sense of worth within themselves, rather than in achievements alone. This shift deepens self-trust and reduces reliance on external approval, allowing identity to become more stable and authentic. Over time, many people recognize that their most significant insights emerged not during success, but through disappointment. Setbacks forced them to reconsider values, develop new abilities, and discover paths they would never have explored otherwise. The lesson of individuation is not that suffering is desirable, but that experience, even painful experience, can become meaningful when consciously understood. Thus, every setback carries a lesson because it redirects awareness inward, it challenges illusion, reveals hidden aspects of the psyche, and invites integration of neglected qualities. Through reflection and acceptance, setbacks transform from mere failures into essential steps toward wholeness, guiding the individual closer to an authentic and fully realized self. Emotional darkness is often experienced as confusion, sadness, doubt, or a sense of inner heaviness that seems to obscure meaning and direction. During such periods, individuals may feel disconnected from motivation or uncertain about their identity and purpose. While these states are frequently feared or resisted, they hold an important psychological function. Emotional darkness does not simply represent suffering. It marks a transitional phase in which the psyche withdraws from old patterns in order to reorganize itself at a deeper level. When life challenges our existence, beliefs or expectations, the mind cannot immediately construct new understanding. The previous worldview begins to lose its certainty, yet a new perspective has not fully formed. This in-between state creates emotional turbulence. The clarity we once relied upon disappears, leaving behind ambiguity and introspection. Although uncomfortable, this period allows unconscious material to rise into awareness, thoughts, memories, and emotions that were previously ignored or suppressed. Dark emotional phases slow us down. In moments of comfort and success, attention is often directed outward toward achievement and activity. Emotional darkness turns awareness inward, encouraging reflection and self-examination. Questions emerge naturally. What am I truly feeling? What no longer aligns with who I am becoming? What parts of myself have I neglected? These questions initiate psychological insight because they require honesty rather than distraction. Within emotional darkness, the psyche processes unresolved experiences. Feelings that were avoided or postponed demand recognition. By confronting these emotions, individuals begin to understand the deeper causes of their struggles rather than merely reacting to symptoms. Gradually, patterns become visible, recurring fears, unmet needs, or conflicts between authentic desires and external expectations. This recognition is the beginning of clarity. Psychological clarity rarely arrives suddenly. It develops through integration. As emotions are acknowledged and understood, inner conflict decreases. The energy once consumed by repression or denial becomes available for conscious thought and purposeful action. What once felt overwhelming begins to make sense, and insight replaces confusion. The individual emerges with a clearer understanding of values, boundaries, and direction. Emotional darkness also cultivates empathy and depth. Experiencing inner struggle expands emotional awareness, allowing a person to relate more compassionately to others. Wisdom often grows from navigating complexity rather than avoiding it. The clarity that follows is therefore not superficial optimism, but grounded understanding, shaped by lived experience. Over time, many realize that emotional darkness functioned like a necessary night before dawn. Just as the mind requires sleep to restore balance, the psyche sometimes requires withdrawal into introspection to achieve renewal. The discomfort signals transformation in progress. a restructuring of meaning occurring beneath conscious awareness. Thus, emotional darkness often precedes psychological clarity because insight is born from confrontation with the unknown parts of ourselves. By allowing these periods to unfold with patience and reflection, confusion gradually transforms into understanding. What once felt like losing direction becomes the very process through which a deeper, clearer sense of self is formed. Persistence is far more than the simple act of continuing to act in the face of difficulty. It is a profound psychological principle that underlies the process of self-realization and the journey toward wholeness. The human psyche is not immediately whole or fully conscious. It develops over time through repeated effort, reflection, and confrontation with both internal and external challenges. To persist is to commit oneself not merely to an outcome, but to the ongoing engagement with life, including its trials, uncertainties, and setbacks. Each act of persistence strengthens the bridge between the conscious self and the deeper, often hidden, dimensions of the psyche. True persistence requires confronting discomfort without avoidance. Life inevitably presents obstacles, whether in the form of failure, rejection, emotional turmoil, or uncertainty. It is pitting to retreat when the familiar sense of control is threatened, yet it is precisely during these moments that the psyche demands attention. By refusing to turn away, by continuing to act despite fear or doubt, individuals train themselves to tolerate the friction between who they are and who they are becoming. In this friction lies transformation, and through transformation, wholeness emerges. Kirst's persistence also fosters self-knowledge. Each challenge faced and each difficulty endured acts as a mirror reflecting hidden strengths, unacknowledged fears, and neglected potentials. When one continues to act despite these challenges, the psyche begins to integrate these fragments. Over time, persistence transforms scattered energies, unresolved emotions, and unconscious drives into a coherent and harmonious whole. What once seemed chaotic or overwhelming becomes a source of insight and personal power. Moreover, persistence develops resilience, a quality essential for wholeness. Resilience is not the absence of vulnerability or suffering, it is the capacity to endure and adapt while maintaining connection with one's core values and sense of purpose. By persisting through difficulty, individuals learn that setbacks do not define them and that temporary discomfort is a necessary teacher. With each act of perseverance, trust in oneself deepens, and the individual becomes increasingly able to navigate life with confidence and integrity. Persistence also nurtures meaning. Life's trials often appear arbitrary or discouraging, yet sustained effort allows the individual to extract purpose from experience. Each step taken, no matter how small, contributes to the ongoing process of self-discovery and the alignment of conscious life with deeper psychological truths. Through this alignment, the self becomes more coherent and life experiences are transformed into a meaningful narrative rather than random occurrences. Ultimately, the path toward wholeness is neither linear nor easy. It requires continuous engagement with the full spectrum of experience, joy and sorrow, certainty and doubt, success and failure. Persistence ensures that the individual remains committed to the process of integration, even when immediate results are invisible. By continuing to move forward, to face challenges, and to engage consciously with life, one gradually unites the fragmented aspects of personality, bringing both conscious and unconscious elements into harmony. In this sense, persistence is not merely endurance. It is a deliberate, courageous, and conscious practice of becoming. Through persistence, we cultivate strength, self-awareness, and resilience. We reconcile shadow and light, vulnerability and courage, uncertainty and clarity, and in doing so, we move closer to the deepest aspiration of the human psyche, to become whole,